At their mother's grave, four young, destitute sisters encounter a wealthy man. The man poses a question, and their heartfelt reply brings him to tears. Before we delve into this tale, we'd love to know where you're joining us from. Please share in the comments. Now, let's begin the story. An autumn breeze drifted through Oakwood Cemetery, sending fallen leaves skittering across the immaculately kept grounds. Matthew Porter drew his luxurious cashmere coat more snugly around his tall figure as he navigated the silent avenues of headstones. His expensive leather shoes crunched on the gravel path, the sound punctuated only by the distant coo of a mourning dove. A decade had passed, 10 long years since he last held his daughter's hand. 10 years defined by a hollow existence, a mere going through the motions rather than truly living. The elegant marble headstone stood pristine against a backdrop of maple trees ablaze in crimson and gold. "Sarah Elizabeth Porter," it declared, "beloved daughter, forever 16. Matthew tenderly placed a bouquet of white roses, Sarah's favorite, against the cool stone. His fingers ran over the engraved letters of her name, a monthly ritual he never missed. "Hello, my dear," he murmured, his voice thick with unshed tears. "Dad's here." At 52, Matthew Porter embodied the image of a triumphant tech magnate. Streaks of silver touched the dark hair at his temples, and fine lines etched around his eyes spoke of years of unwavering focus and resolve. Forbes had recently estimated his company's worth at $11 billion. He owned properties in 5 different countries. Yet here, kneeling before his daughter's final resting place, he was merely a father, grappling with a void no success could fill. He settled onto the small bench he'd had installed beside her grave, readying himself for his customary one-sided conversation, when a flicker of movement among the thinning trees captured his attention. He saw 4 small shapes nearing a grave several plots distant. Children, 4 girls of varying heights, their attire clearly old and ill-fitting. The eldest, who seemed about 12, held the hand of the littlest one, no older than 6. The 2 middle girls carried small bunches of wildflowers, likely daisies gathered from somewhere close by. Matthew observed, his grief momentarily overshadowed by curiosity. Children were an uncommon sight in the cemetery, particularly unaccompanied. The eldest girl guided the others with a gentle firmness, assisting the youngest in placing her flowers, carefully adjusting the simple arrangement. Their soft voices floated on the wind, too far to discern words, but their solemn respect was evident. They formed a small semicircle. Heads bowed for a moment before the youngest girl glanced up, met Matthew's gaze, and offered an enthusiastic wave. Surprised at being noticed, Matthew gave an awkward nod in return. He assumed they would depart, but instead, after a quick hushed discussion, the 4 started walking towards him. "Excuse me, sir," the oldest girl said, approaching with a cautious yet surprisingly composed air. Her reddish-brown hair was secured in a neat ponytail, her eyes possessing a gravity unusual for her age. "We hope we're not bothering you." "Not at all," Matthew replied, taken aback by her composure. "I was just visiting." The smallest girl peeked out from behind her older sister, her blue eyes wide with inquisitiveness. She clutched a worn-out stuffed rabbit, one ear missing. "Whose grave are you visiting?" she inquired, her voice soft but audible. Matthew's gaze fell to Sarah's headstone. "My daughter." The oldest girl gently nudged the little one. "Abby, that's not a polite question." But the youngest, Abby, stepped forward, her attention drawn to Sarah's name. "Is that Sarah?" she asked, pointing. Matthew's breath hitched. "Yes, how did you know?" "We're visiting our Auntie Sarah, too," Abby announced proudly. "Mommy said she's our special angel in heaven." The second oldest girl, seeing Matthew's bewilderment, quickly clarified. "She means we're visiting our mother. Mommy always told us Sarah is an angel watching over us." Matthew felt the ground shift slightly. "Your mother, she knew my Sarah." The oldest girl nodded gravely. "I'm Emma Miller. These are my sisters, Lily, Sophie, and Abby." She indicated each in turn. "Our mom was Jessica Miller. She worked as a nurse at Memorial Children's Hospital." The name struck Matthew with the force of a physical blow. Jessica Miller. Of course, he recalled her, the compassionate nurse with a gentle touch who had been with Sarah during her most difficult nights, who had miraculously managed to elicit smiles from his daughter when no one else could. "Your mother," Matthew's voice trembled. "She looked after Sarah while she was ill." Emma nodded, a shadow falling across her youthful features. "Mom died 6 months ago, but she always told us to remember Sarah. She said they made a promise." Matthew looked at these 4 girls, Their frayed clothes, the slender frames of the older two, the smudges of dirt on their faces hinting at hardship, and felt a stirring of something that had lain dormant for a decade. "What kind of promise?" he asked gently. It was the third child, Sophie, who replied, her voice serious beyond her years. "Mommy said she promised Sarah she wouldn't be alone, and Sarah promised Mommy she'd look after us from heaven." She gestured to the nearby grave they had been tending, a simple marker in contrast to Sarah's ornate monument. Matthew rose slowly, drawn to the modest headstone. "Jessica Marie Miller," it read, "beloved mother and healer, forever in our hearts." As he gazed at the name, Abby slipped her small hand into his. The contact, the first genuine human touch he'd truly allowed himself in years, sent a tremor through him. "Are you Sarah's daddy?" she asked, looking up at him with innocent wonder. Matthew nodded, a lump in his throat preventing speech. "Then you must be the one Mommy said would be all right eventually," Abby stated with the unwavering conviction only a child possesses. "She told Sarah not to worry about you anymore." A tear escaped Matthew's eye before he could stop it, tracing a path down his weathered cheek. For 10 years, he had come to this cemetery, his grief a heavy shield. Never had he imagined discovering a link to Sarah here, a piece of her life he hadn't known, kept alive by these 4 little girls with wildflowers clutched in their hands. "Would you like to place one of our flowers on Sarah's grave?" Lily, the second oldest, offered, extending a perfect white daisy. Matthew accepted it, his billion-dollar hands unsteady as they closed around the simple stem. Alongside the 4 sisters, he laid the wildflower among the costly roses. "Thank you," he managed. "I believe she would have cherished that." As the autumn wind sighed again through the cemetery trees, Matthew Porter stood with the Miller sisters, sensing for the first time in a decade that something profound had shifted within his world. He couldn't yet fathom how these 4 girls would alter his life, nor could he envision the journey that lay ahead. But standing there, looking at the white daisy beside his daughter's name, Matthew felt a flicker of something he had thought lost to him forever. That night, sleep eluded Matthew as he paced his vast, empty mansion. The meeting with the Miller sisters had deeply unsettled him. His mind reeled with images of Sarah and snippets of conversations with Jessica, the nurse whose kindness had been a beacon during his darkest days. He found himself in his home office, a room seemingly frozen in time, with the same leather chair and mahogany desk, its walls adorned with accolades that now felt meaningless. In a bottom drawer, locked away for years, rested a box of Sarah's personal belongings. With trembling hands, he opened it for the first time since her passing. Sarah's journal lay on top, its purple cover softened by daily use. Matthew had never summoned the courage to read it. Now he carefully turned the pages, his daughter's handwriting a poignant echo of all he had lost. And then he found it, an entry dated 3 months before she died. "Nurse Jessica told me the most amusing story today about her daughters. The little one Abby tried to help by giving the cat a bubble bath. I laughed so hard Mom thought something was wrong. It's good to laugh again." Jessica makes the hospital less daunting. "She promised she'd look after Dad if anything happens to me. I told her he's stubborn and works too much, but she just smiled and said, 'Everyone needs someone to care, Sarah, even billionaires.'" Matthew's vision blurred. All these years he'd isolated himself, immersed himself in work, spurned every offer of companionship, while Sarah had worried about him, had tried to ensure someone might breach his defenses. The doorbell chimed, jolting him from his reverie. At 2 in the morning, it could only be one person. "You look dreadful," James Anderson stated bluntly as he entered. His oldest friend and lawyer was the sole individual who still persistently checked on him, despite Matthew's efforts to keep him at bay. "I need your assistance," Matthew said, dismissing the remark. 4 girls at the cemetery today, the Miller sisters. Their mother was Sarah's nurse." James arched an eyebrow. "And something's amiss. They appeared neglected. I need to ensure they're safe." James sighed. "Matt, you can't rescue everyone." "I'm not attempting to rescue everyone," Matthew retorted, his voice firm. "Just these 4. There's a connection, James, to Sarah. I must understand it." James observed his friend intently. For a decade, he'd witnessed Matthew withdraw from life, shunning comfort, rejecting connection. This was the first sign in years of interest in anything beyond his corporations. "All right," James conceded. "I'll have my investigator look into the Miller family first thing." After James departed, Matthew returned to Sarah's journal, reading until dawn. Jessica featured in entry after entry, bringing small tokens, sharing stories, sitting with Sarah when Matthew was ensnared in meetings. By sunrise, Matthew had resolved he would find these girls again. Not merely to learn more about their link to Sarah, but because something in Abby's innocent gaze and Emma's prematurely adult sense of responsibility had reawakened a part of him he thought had perished with his daughter, a purpose beyond mere survival. The following Saturday, Matthew went back to the cemetery, his heart pounding with a mix of hope and apprehension. Would the girls be there? He waited near Sarah's grave, feigning to arrange fresh flowers while his eyes scanned the pathways. After an hour, he saw them, 4 small figures winding their way through the headstones. This time, he noticed details previously overlooked. Emma's protective posture as she steered her sisters, Lily's cautious steps, Sophie's contemplative gaze, and little Abby skipping despite the somber surroundings. "You returned," Emma said, a note of surprise in her voice. Her auburn hair was secured in the same sensible ponytail, but today a small clip attempted to tame her bangs. "I did," Matthew replied, striving for a casual tone. "I thought perhaps we could talk some more." The girls exchanged a look, a silent dialogue that spoke of their tight-knit bond. "We're the Miller sisters," Emma finally stated, taking the lead. "I'm Emma, I'm 12, this is Lily, she's 10, Sophie is 8, and Abby just turned 6 last month." "It's good to meet you properly," Matthew said. "I'm Matthew Porter, Sarah's father." "Porter like Porter Technology?" Sophie asked, her eyes widening. "We learned about your company in school before," she trailed off, looking down. "Before we had to stop going," Lily finished softly. A flicker of concern crossed Matthew's face. "You don't attend school." Emma's posture stiffened. "It's complicated. We had to move after Mom died. The new school needs documents from our stepdad, but he's busy." The way she uttered busy conveyed volumes to Matthew. "Your stepdad looks after you now?" he asked carefully. A shadow fell across Emma's face. "He's meant to, but he isn't home much." "How about some hot chocolate?" Matthew offered, sensing their unease. "There's a cafe nearby." 20 minutes later, Matthew watched with quiet dismay as the girls consumed hot chocolates and pastries, as if they hadn't had a proper meal in days. Even Emma, with her determined composure, couldn't conceal her hunger. "Mom worked at the hospital for 15 years, Emma explained between mouthfuls. "She adored her job, especially with the children." "She always told us stories about Sarah," Sophie added. "How courageous she was and how she made everyone laugh even when she was so ill." Abby, chocolate smeared around her mouth, looked up at Matthew. "Mom said Sarah was the strongest person she ever knew. That's why she's such a good angel." Matthew felt his throat constrict. "Your mother was exceptionally kind to Sarah and to me." "Would you like to see where we live?" Lily asked unexpectedly. "It's not far." Despite Emma's cautionary glance, Matthew agreed. An instinct told him he needed to witness their living conditions. As they walked, James called with initial findings. Matthew stepped aside. "The girl's mother passed from pneumonia 6 months ago," James reported. "She left them with their stepfather, Victor Miller. He has a record, mostly minor theft, some fraud, there's more. Jessica inherited a significant sum, nearly $500,000, shortly before her death. No trace of it now." "The girls mentioned they had to relocate," Matthew murmured. "That aligns," James replied. "Their previous home was sold 3 months ago." As Matthew ended the call, he looked at the 4 waiting sisters with a new depth of understanding. These girls weren't just linked to Sarah. They desperately needed assistance. And perhaps, in aiding them, he might finally fulfill the promise Jessica had made to his daughter all those years ago. The apartment building loomed ahead, a dilapidated 5-story structure with boarded-up windows and graffiti-marred walls. Matthew's luxury car seemed utterly incongruous parked at the curb. Emma led the way, clutching a key on a frayed string around her neck. "We're on the 3rd floor," she stated, guiding them up a staircase with missing banisters. The stairwell reeked of mildew and urine, forcing Matthew to breathe shallowly. Their apartment was tiny but impeccably clean, a stark contrast to the building's decay. Matthew recognized the desperate attempts of children striving to maintain order. A single mattress lay in one corner, covered with neatly folded blankets. A small table held a few school books and toys. "You all sleep here?" he asked, noting the absence of proper beds. "We share," Emma replied matter-of-factly. "It's warmer that way." The kitchen comprised a hot plate and a mini fridge. Opening it, Matthew found only a half-empty carton of milk and some sliced bread. "Victor brings food sometimes," Lily said, noticing his expression. When he remembers, Sophie added quietly. Sophie tugged at Matthew's sleeve. Want to see Mom's special box? It has pictures of Sarah. The special box was a battered shoebox concealed beneath a loose floorboard. Inside were photographs, letters, and a small, leather-bound journal. Matthew's hands trembled as he found a picture of Sarah in her hospital bed, smiling despite the array of tubes and monitors, with Jessica seated beside her. Mom kept everything about Sarah, Emma explained. She said it was important to remember special people. A yellowed envelope caught Matthew's eye. Inside was a letter in Sarah's handwriting. Dear Jessica, thank you for being my friend when I needed one most. Please don't worry about Dad after I'm gone. He's stronger than he thinks. But if you ever see him looking lost, remind him that I want him to be happy again. Love, Sarah. Matthew's vision blurred. Another envelope held official-looking documents, financial statements, a will, property deeds. These are your mother's financial papers, Matthew observed, examining them. Did you know she inherited money from a relative? The girls appeared confused. Mom said Aunt Martha left us something, Emma replied, but Victor said it was just enough to cover old debts. Matthew's jaw tightened as he found a document bearing two signatures, Jessica's and Victor's, transferring property rights and financial assets. Even to his untrained eye, Jessica's signature appeared forged. Where is Victor now? He asked, attempting a casual tone. Working, Emma said with a shrug. He won't be back until late, maybe tomorrow. Matthew continued to study the documents when Abby climbed onto his lap, a faded photo album in her small hands. These are pictures of Mommy and us, she announced, opening to the first page. The contrast was heart-wrenching. Earlier photos depicted a loving family with a healthy, smiling Jessica and well-dressed children. More recent ones revealed Jessica's declining health and the girl's increasingly worn appearance. As Abby turned pages, Matthew noticed Sophie's labored breathing and occasional cough. Lily seemed unnaturally gaunt, while Emma's wrists protruded sharply from her sleeves. His decision solidified. He couldn't leave these children in this situation. His phone vibrated. A text from James. Background check complete. Victor Miller convicted of fraud twice, currently on probation. Call me ASAP. As Matthew prepared to step away to make the call, the apartment door burst open. A man stood swaying in the doorway, his bloodshot eyes narrowing at the unexpected guest. Who the hell are you? Victor Miller demanded, his breath heavy with alcohol. Matthew rose slowly, positioning himself between the girls and their stepfather. I'm Matthew Porter, he replied calmly, and I believe we need to discuss these children. Matthew Porter, Victor's bloodshot eyes widened in recognition. The billionaire, what are you doing in my apartment? Matthew maintained his composed exterior, though fury simmered beneath. I'm a friend of the family. I was just checking on the girls. Victor's gaze shifted between Matthew and the children, a calculating look replacing his initial surprise. Emma had pulled her sisters behind her, Abby clinging to her leg, fear etched on all their faces. Well, isn't that kind? Victor slurred, attempting a charming smile that didn't reach his eyes. These girls are my responsibility, you know, my stepdaughters, got the papers and everything. Yes, I've seen some rather interesting papers today, Matthew replied, his voice deceptively mild, including financial documents with Jessica's signature that looked suspiciously forged. Victor's face hardened. You should depart now. Gladly, Matthew said, and the girls are accompanying me. Like hell they are, Victor lunged, but alcohol made him ungainly. Matthew easily sidestepped, placing himself more firmly between the man and the children. You're intoxicated, Victor. These children haven't been adequately cared for in months. They're malnourished, possibly ill, and living in dreadful conditions. You have no right, Victor spat, his friendly demeanor vanishing. They're my meal ticket. The moment the words escaped, Victor seemed to grasp his error. Matthew's expression turned to stone. What did you just say? Victor backtracked both literally and figuratively. Nothing. I meant I'm responsible for them. Their welfare payments come to me. And Jessica's inheritance? Matthew pressed. The house that was sold, the $500,000. Victor's hand moved towards his pocket. Matthew tensed, but instead of a weapon, Victor produced his phone. I'm calling the authorities. You're trespassing. An excellent notion, Matthew agreed. I'm certain they'll be very interested in these financial documents and in the condition of these children. Victor's finger hovered over his phone. Behind Matthew, Abby began to cough, a deep, rattling sound that shook her small frame. Everyone turned as the coughing intensified, the little girl's face becoming alarmingly flushed. "She needs a doctor," Matthew said instantly, moving towards the child. He placed a hand on her forehead. "She's feverish." Emma looked terrified. "She's been coughing all week. I gave her the medicine Mom left, but it's finished." Making a swift decision, Matthew scooped Abby into his arms. "I'm taking her to the hospital. The rest of you come with me." "You can't just," Victor began, but Matthew interrupted him. "Call the police, Victor. I'll gladly explain why I'm taking a dangerously ill child to receive medical care." He fixed Victor with a stare that had made corporate adversaries crumble. "Or you can step aside now, and we can discuss this when you're sober." Victor wavered, self-preservation overriding greed. He stepped back, muttering threats. Matthew carried Abby down the stairs, her sisters following closely. The little girl's breathing was strained, her small body radiating heat. "Get in," he said, unlocking his car. Emma hesitated only for a moment before helping her sisters into the back seat. "Where are we going?" Lily asked, her voice faint. "First to the hospital for Abby," Matthew replied, starting the engine. "Then somewhere safe." As they drove away, he caught Emma's eye in the rearview mirror. "I promise you," he said, "this ends today, all of it." The fear in her eyes was tinged with something Matthew hadn't seen there before, the faintest glimmer of hope. Matthew's penthouse spanned the top 3 floors of a sleek glass tower in the city's core. Floor-to-ceiling, windows afforded stunning panoramic vistas, while minimalist decor in muted grays and blacks fostered an air of sophisticated sterility. It was a space crafted for a solitary man, devoid of warmth, color, or any trace of childhood. Until now. "Your house is in the sky," Sophie whispered, pressing her nose against the glass, her breath misting the pristine surface. 24 hours after their escape from Victor's apartment, the 3 older Miller sisters were exploring their temporary haven, while Abby remained hospitalized with pneumonia. "It's not exactly a house," Matthew replied, observing the girls' reactions with a curious blend of unease and pride. "More of an apartment, a penthouse." "It's larger than our entire building," Lily remarked, running her hand along the cool marble kitchen counter. Emma, ever watchful, stayed close to Matthew, as if anticipating he might retract his offer at any moment. "How long can we stay?" she asked directly. The question lingered. Matthew hadn't considered beyond getting them to safety. The previous night had been a whirlwind of hospital paperwork, concerned doctors, and urgent calls to James regarding temporary guardianship. "As long as you need to," he finally answered, "until we resolve everything." Emma's skeptical look conveyed how many adult promises she'd seen broken. The elevator chimed and they all turned. James emerged, carrying several shopping bags. "Clothes, toiletries, and some basic necessities," he announced, setting them down. "My assistant estimated the sizes." Matthew introduced the girls to his attorney, explaining James was assisting with their predicament. The lawyer's typically stern expression softened as he greeted each sister. While the girls examined their new clothes, James pulled Matthew aside. "We have an issue," he murmured. "Victor's alleging the girls were abducted. He's filed a police report." Matthew's jaw tightened. "That's preposterous. He was drunk, neglectful." "I know," James interjected, "but legally, he's their guardian. The hospital is filing a report with Child Protective Services about Abby's condition, which aids our case. But we must act swiftly." "What do we need?" "Evidence of the financial fraud, proof of neglect, and someone with legal standing to petition for guardianship." James hesitated. "Matt, why are you doing this? You've shunned attachments for 10 years, and suddenly you're fighting for custody of 4 children you've just met." Matthew glanced at the girls. Lily was showing Emma a sparkly shirt from the bags, her face alight with a joy that seemed incongruous given their circumstances. "Sarah asked Jessica to look after me," he said quietly. "Instead, Jessica passed away and left 4 daughters with no one to protect them. It feels like completing a circle somehow." James studied his friend's face. "You realize this won't be simple, not even for a man of your means." "Nothing worthwhile ever is." Later that evening, after a dinner where the girls marveled at the array of foods delivered from Matthew's favorite restaurant, he received a call from the hospital. Abby was stable but would need to remain for several more days. "Can we visit her tomorrow?" Emma asked, hovering nearby during the call. "Of course," Matthew promised. "First thing." As bedtime neared, a new challenge arose. The penthouse had 4 bedrooms, but the girls refused to be separated. "We always sleep together," Lily explained, anxiety in her voice. Matthew quickly reconfigured one of the guest rooms, pushing furniture aside to create a makeshift bed large enough for 3. He watched as Emma tucked in her sisters with practiced care, murmuring reassurances about Abby. Standing in the doorway, observing this small family unit within his sterile home, Matthew acknowledged he had no clue what he was doing. But for the first time in a decade, he was doing something that truly mattered. "You need to hold the spoon like this," Matthew demonstrated, guiding Lily's hand as she tried to measure baking powder. 3 days into their new living arrangement, they were attempting to make pancakes, the girls' first home-cooked breakfast since their mother's passing. The kitchen, previously used only for coffee and storing takeout, had become a flour-dusted battleground. Sophie sat cross-legged on the counter, reading instructions from an online recipe, while Emma carefully flipped a misshapen pancake, her face set in concentration. "Is it meant to look like that?" Sophie asked doubtfully, pointing at the lumpy batter. "I have absolutely no idea," Matthew confessed, eliciting surprised giggles from the girls. "Culinary skills weren't part of my CEO training." The pancakes turned out edible, if oddly shaped, a victory they celebrated with enthusiasm. These small moments of normalcy had become invaluable, bridging the vast gap between Matthew's world and the girls'. After breakfast, they visited Abby at the hospital, bringing a hand-drawn card and a stuffed rabbit Matthew had impulsively bought at the gift shop. The little girl's condition was improving, her fever finally gone, though doctors wanted to monitor her for another day. "When can we take her home?" Lily asked, her small hand slipping naturally into Matthew's as they left the hospital. The casual gesture caught him off guard, this unearned trust from a child who had every reason to be wary. "Tomorrow, if all goes well," he promised. Back at the penthouse, while the girls settled in for a movie Matthew had never heard of, involving princesses with magical abilities, he retreated to his office for a video call with James. "The investigation is progressing," James reported. "We've confirmed Victor forged Jessica's signature on at least 8 documents. He liquidated her entire inheritance within 3 months of her death. Can we recover any of it?" "Some. He spent a considerable amount, but we've located several large purchases, a boat, a car, gambling debts paid off. We can pursue those assets. And custody," James paused. "That's more complex. The temporary emergency guardianship will hold for now due to Abby's medical situation, but for permanent custody," he trailed off, choosing his words. "Matthew, the courts typically favor blood relatives or those with established connections." "Sarah is my connection," Matthew stated firmly. "And Jessica, these girls have no one else. There might be relatives we haven't found, and frankly, your lifestyle isn't exactly child-friendly. You work 16-hour days, travel constantly." "I can change that," Matthew interrupted. "I will change that." A small noise made him turn. Emma stood in the doorway, her expression unreadable. How much had she overheard? "We need more popcorn," she said, her voice carefully neutral. After James signed off, Matthew found Emma in the kitchen, methodically arranging popcorn in 4 bowls. "You don't have to alter your entire life for us," she said without preamble. "We know this is temporary." Matthew leaned against the counter. "What if I don't want it to be temporary?" Emma looked up, her young face reflecting the weariness of someone who'd learned early that hope could be perilous. "People always want to help initially, then it becomes difficult." "I'm not most people," Matthew replied, meeting her gaze directly, "and I don't give up when things get hard." Emma studied him for a long moment, as if searching for a falsehood in his words. Finally, she handed him 2 of the popcorn bowls. "Sophie likes extra butter," she said simply. But the faint smile that accompanied her words felt like a victory more significant than any business deal Matthew had ever closed. That night, checking on the girls before bed, he found all 3 asleep in their shared room, Sophie's head on Emma's shoulder, Lily curled protectively around her sister's stuffed cat. The sight stirred something profound in Matthew's chest, a feeling both painful and necessary, like a limb regaining sensation after being numb for too long. Abby came home from the hospital on a Thursday morning, her small body still frail but her spirit undaunted. The moment she stepped into the penthouse, the space transformed, her delighted squeals at seeing her sisters echoing off the minimalist walls that had never before held such unrestrained joy. "Your house is so big," she exclaimed, eyes wide as she explored on unsteady legs. "Do you live here all by yourself?" "I did," Matthew answered honestly, Until now. That evening, after the excitement had subsided and Abby was tucked safely in bed with her sisters, Matthew retreated to the balcony with a glass of scotch. The city lights spread below him like a carpet of stars, a vista that had once symbolized all he'd achieved. Now it seemed strangely empty compared to the 4 sleeping children inside. The balcony door slid open. Emma stepped out, wrapped in a blanket against the autumn chill. "Couldn't sleep?" Matthew asked. She shook her head, settling into the chair beside him. "Too quiet. I'm used to city noises, not being above them." They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes before Emma spoke again. "Can I ask you something about Sarah?" Matthew tensed reflexively, then forced himself to relax. "Of course." "What was she like? Mom told us stories, but—" "She was extraordinary," Matthew began, surprised by how easily the words came after years of avoiding the topic. "Brilliant, stubborn, compassionate. Even when she was sick, she worried more about everyone else's feelings than her own. Mom said she never complained, not once." "That's true," Matthew smiled faintly. "She used to say there was no point wasting energy on complaining when you could use it for living instead." Emma pulled her knees to her chest. "What about her mom, your wife?" "Caroline," Matthew said, the name rusty from disuse. "She died when Sarah was 7, car accident." "So Sarah grew up without a mom, too," Emma observed quietly. The parallel struck Matthew with unexpected force. "Yes, though I was less present than I should have been. After Caroline died, I buried myself in work." "That's what adults do," Emma said with the weary wisdom of a child who'd seen too much. "They hide from the painful stuff." Matthew studied her profile, so young yet so perceptive. "Your mother, was she ill for a long time?" Emma's fingers tightened on the blanket. "She started coughing last winter, said it was just a cold, but it got worse. We couldn't afford doctors after she had to stop working. By the time she went to the hospital," her voice cracked slightly. "I'm sorry," Matthew said, the inadequacy of the words hanging in the night air. "Victor showed up 2 days after the funeral," Emma continued, her tone hardening. "Said he was our legal guardian now. We'd only met him twice before. Mom married him when I was 9, but he left after a few months. She never even changed our last names." "Did your mother leave any messages, videos, letters?" Emma shook her head. "Just the box of memories, and she made me promise to keep everyone together no matter what." Her voice grew smaller. "I tried, but I couldn't protect them from everything." The weight of responsibility on those young shoulders struck Matthew like a physical blow. Here was a child forced to become a parent, just as he'd been forced into single fatherhood. Both unprepared, both determined, both haunted by promises made to the dying. Without thinking, Matthew reached out, placing his hand gently over Emma's. "You did protect them. You kept them together, kept them alive. That's more than most adults could have managed." Emma didn't pull away. In the faint reflection of the glass balcony door, Matthew saw a tear slide down her cheek. "Miss her so much," she whispered. "I know," Matthew replied softly. "I still miss Sarah every day." They sat together in the quiet darkness, 2 souls connected by parallel losses, while inside the penthouse, 3 little girls slept peacefully for the first time in months. 2 weeks had passed since the Miller sisters moved into Matthew's penthouse. What began as an emergency measure had evolved into something resembling a home. Colorful artwork now adorned the refrigerator, throw pillows were perpetually askew, and the sound of children's laughter frequently echoed through once silent rooms. Today, Matthew sat in his home office, surrounded by legal documents. Across from him, James reviewed their strategy for the upcoming custody hearing. "The good news," James said, adjusting his glasses, "is that Child Protective Services investigation clearly shows the girls were neglected under Victor's care. Abby's medical records alone are damning." "And the bad news?" Matthew asked, bracing himself. "Victor's fighting back, claiming you essentially abducted the children and are using your wealth and influence to steal them. He's portraying himself as a grieving stepfather overwhelmed by tragedy." Matthew's jaw tightened. "That's absurd." "But potentially effective," James warned. "Courts are naturally wary when a wealthy single man suddenly seeks custody of 4 young girls." A soft knock interrupted them. Emma stood in the doorway, a tray of cookies in her hands. "Sophie and Lily made these," she explained. "They wanted to thank you for the art supplies." The cookies were misshapen and slightly burnt, but Matthew accepted them with genuine appreciation. After Emma left, he turned back to James. What do we need to win this? James spread several documents across the desk. First, concrete evidence of Victor's fraud. Second, testimony about the girl's well-being before and after Jessica's death. And third, he hesitated, we need to demonstrate that you can provide not just financial stability but emotional support, that you're committed to raising these children long-term. I am committed, Matthew said firmly. Are you? James challenged gently. 3 weeks ago, you lived alone, worked 80-hour weeks, and hadn't spoken Sarah's name in years. Now you want to become an instant father to 4 traumatized children. Matthew fell silent, considering his friend's words. His gaze drifted to a photo of Sarah that now sat on his desk, placed there by Lily, who had found it while exploring. I've spent 10 years building an empire that means nothing, he finally said. These girls, they're the first thing that's felt right since Sarah died. James nodded, his expression softening. Then we need to make the courts see that, and we need something concrete on Victor. What about Jessica's safety deposit box? Emma mentioned it yesterday. Victor never found the key. James looked intrigued. That could contain exactly what we need. Later that afternoon, Matthew gathered the girls in the living room. He needed to discuss the custody situation to prepare them for the legal battle ahead. But how did one explain complex legal proceedings to children who had already endured so much? I want to talk about the future, he began carefully. About you staying here with me permanently. Abby, now recovered and full of energy, looked up from her coloring book. Forever and ever. That's the plan, Matthew nodded, but Victor is trying to make you go back to him. Emma's expression darkened. We're not going back. No, you're not, Matthew assured her. But we need to convince a judge of that. It might get complicated. Sophie, always the thoughtful one, asked, will we have to see him again? Possibly, but not alone. Never alone, Matthew promised. Lily had been quiet throughout the conversation, fidgeting with the hem of her shirt. Finally, she spoke. Would we be like your daughters? The question caught Matthew off guard. In his focus on the legal aspects, he hadn't considered what to call this new relationship. Yes, he said, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. If that's what you want. What about our last name? Emma asked. Mom would want us to keep Miller. You could be Miller Porters, Matthew suggested. Or keep Miller, whatever feels right to you. Abby climbed into his lap, a gesture that had become increasingly common. I think Mommy would be happy you're taking care of us. She always said Sarah was watching over us, and now you are too. Matthew's throat tightened as he looked at these 4 remarkable children who had somehow crashed through the walls he'd built around his heart. The legal path ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in a decade, Matthew Porter was fighting for something more valuable than business success or financial gain. He was fighting for a family. Dark clouds massed over the city skyline, heavy with rain and a sense of foreboding. Weather alerts had been sounding on phones all day, warning of an approaching storm system, potentially the most severe to hit the region in decades. Matthew stood at the penthouse windows, watching the sky darken to an eerie green-gray as the barometric pressure dropped. Girls, let's finish gathering the emergency supplies, he called, turning from the view. In the kitchen, Emma and Sophie were filling containers with water while Lily helped Abby arrange battery-operated lanterns and flashlights on the dining table. Is it going to be a really big storm? Abby asked, her small hands carefully lining up flashlights by size. The weather service says it might be, Matthew answered honestly. Over the past weeks, he'd learned the girls responded better to truth, even harsh truth, than to false comfort. Emma looked up. What if the power goes out? We have a generator for essential systems, Matthew explained. But we should be prepared anyway, better safe than sorry. The past 3 days had been a flurry of activity. After learning about Jessica's safety deposit box, James had secured a court order to access it. Tomorrow, they would open it together, potentially finding evidence crucial to their case against Victor. The custody hearing was set for the following week, but tonight, all attention was on the impending storm. I don't like thunder, Lily admitted quietly as she helped Matthew tape the windows. An arguably unnecessary precaution at their height, but it made the girls feel more secure. We'll all stay together in the media room, Matthew assured her. It's the most interior space away from the windows. By evening, the storm had arrived with full intensity. Rain lashed against the glass in horizontal torrents, and wind howled around the building's edges. The girls had transformed the media room into a cozy den, dragging in pillows, blankets, and stuffed animals to create a nest on the floor. They were partway through their second movie when the lights flickered, then extinguished completely. The backup generator hummed to life moments later, but only provided power for emergency lighting and essential systems. "Everyone okay?" Matthew asked, switching on one of their prepared lanterns. 4 small voices affirmed, though he could detect the tension in their replies. Outside, thunder crashed with such violence the building seemed to shudder. Abby crawled into Matthew's lap, clutching her stuffed rabbit. "Tell us a story," she requested, her voice small but firm. "A happy one." Matthew paused, then began describing Sarah's 6th birthday party, a princess-themed affair with a castle cake and a real pony. The girls listened raptly, interjecting with questions and laughing at Sarah's surprise when the pony nibbled her dress. As Matthew spoke, sharing memories he'd kept buried for so long, he realized something fundamental had shifted within him. The pain remained, but it no longer overshadowed the recollections. He could speak of Sarah with joy now, not just sorrow. A particularly fierce gust of wind slammed against the building, accompanied by a distant crashing sound. Abby whimpered, burrowing deeper into Matthew's arms. "The building is designed to withstand much stronger storms than this," he reassured her, stroking her hair. "We're perfectly safe up here." No sooner had the words left his mouth than the emergency lights flickered and died. The backup generator had failed. In the sudden blackness, Matthew felt the girls draw closer, seeking comfort. He quickly activated several lanterns, creating pools of warm light. "The storm must have damaged the generator," he explained, striving to keep his voice calm. "It's all right, we have plenty of lanterns." He broke off as Sophie began coughing, a deep, wheezing sound chillingly reminiscent of Abby's illness weeks before. The cough persisted, growing more strained. "Sophie, what's wrong?" Emma asked, her voice sharp with alarm. "Can't breathe, right?" Sophie gasped between coughs. Matthew moved swiftly to her side, his heart pounding. "Sophie, do you have asthma?" The little girl nodded, still struggling for air. "Inhaler in my bag." Emma was already moving, scrambling towards the doorway. "I'll get it." Matthew held Sophie upright, coaching her to take slow, controlled breaths. Lily and Abby watched, their eyes wide with fear. Emma returned moments later, panic evident on her face. "It's not there. I can't find it anywhere." "When did you last use it?" Matthew asked Sophie, trying to remain composed while his mind raced. "Yesterday," she wheezed. "Maybe bathroom." The situation was rapidly deteriorating. Sophie's lips were taking on a bluish tinge, her breathing more labored by the second. They needed that inhaler or to get her to emergency services immediately. "Emma, check the bathrooms," Matthew instructed. "Lily, look in the kitchen. I'll check the bedrooms." With Abby trailing anxiously, Matthew searched the girl's bedroom, then his own. No inhaler. The storm outside had intensified, rain hammering the windows with renewed violence. The thought of attempting to get Sophie to a hospital in these conditions was terrifying but becoming unavoidable. They reconvened in the media room, all reporting failure. Sophie was now leaning heavily against the wall, her breathing shallow and rapid. "We need to get her to a hospital," Matthew decided, already mentally plotting the fastest route. Just then the landline phone, a feature Matthew had almost forgotten in the cell phone age, began to ring. He answered quickly, hoping it was building management with news about the generator. Instead, a chillingly familiar voice came through the line. "I know you've got my girls," Victor slurred, the connection crackling. "And I know you're going to that safety deposit box tomorrow. Think you're so smart, but I've got friends at the bank. I know everything." Matthew's blood ran cold. "Victor, now is not the time. Sophie is having a severe asthma attack and needs medical attention." There was a pause, then a harsh laugh. "Little Sophie always was a sickly one. Her inhaler's probably in my apartment. Found it last week, forgot to give it back. Oops." The casual cruelty of the statement struck Matthew like a physical blow. "You deliberately took her medication." "Consider it a reminder," Victor growled. "Those are my kids, Porter, my meal ticket, and I'm coming to get what's mine." The line went dead, leaving Matthew staring at the receiver in shock and fury. When he turned back to the girls, he saw Emma had heard every word, her young face a mask of terror. "He's coming here," she whispered. Before Matthew could respond, a new sound cut through the storm's chaos. The elevator alarm indicating someone had triggered the emergency override. Victor hadn't just threatened, he was already in the building. "Lock the doors," Matthew commanded, instantly shifting into crisis mode. "Emma, help me move Sophie to the master bathroom. It has a lock. Lily, bring water and wet towels." They worked quickly in the dim lantern light as thunder crashed. Matthew's mind raced. Building security was compromised by the power outage, cell service was down, and the landline had gone dead. "He has a key to the service elevator," Emma whispered as they positioned Sophie in the bathroom. "From when he worked maintenance in a building like this." Matthew locked the bathroom door, placing Abby and Lily inside with their sister. Emma refused to hide. "I need to help," she insisted, her young face resolute. They didn't have long to wait. A thunderous pounding at the front door announced Victor's arrival. Matthew positioned Emma behind him and approached cautiously. Through the peephole, he saw Victor, soaking wet, wild-eyed, swaying slightly. In his right hand, something metallic glinted, a knife. "I know you're in there, Porter," Victor shouted, slamming his fist against the door again. "Give me those girls, or I swear I'll—" Matthew's mind calculated rapidly. Sophie needed medical attention urgently. The penthouse had a private stairwell for emergencies, but 40 flights down with a critically ill child was unthinkable. He needed to neutralize the threat. "Stay here," he whispered to Emma, moving towards his office. In his desk drawer was a small safe containing the one thing Caroline had insisted on after Sarah was born, a handgun. Matthew had never fired it outside a training range, but its weight was grimly reassuring as Victor began ramming the door. "Emma," Matthew said, returning to the frightened girl, "I need you to do something very brave. The minute I open this door, run to the house phone in my bedroom. It has a direct line to building security in the basement." Emma nodded, her face pale but determined. The door splintered near the hinges as Victor charged it again. Matthew positioned himself, gun concealed, and called out, "Victor, stop! I'm opening the door. We need to talk." He unlocked it and stepped back. The moment Victor burst in, knife raised, Matthew moved with surprising speed, knocking the weapon from his hand and forcing him to the ground with techniques from long-forgotten self-defense classes. "Security," Emma shouted into the phone. "Penthouse, emergency, man with a weapon." Victor struggled beneath Matthew's grip, spewing threats. "You think you've won? I've got insurance. Videos of Jessica admitting to stealing from patients. Her reputation goes down and those brats lose everything." Matthew increased pressure on Victor's arm. "You're lying." Victor's laugh was ugly. "Safety deposit box has her confession. Tomorrow it all goes public unless you pay me." "What confession?" Matthew demanded. But Victor had passed out, the combination of alcohol and exertion finally too much. Within minutes, security arrived. The storm had abated enough for them to use the emergency stairs. As paramedics tended to Sophie and police secured Victor, Matthew held the frightened girls close. "It's over," he promised, "and tomorrow we'll find the truth." The safety deposit box contained no confession. Instead, Matthew and James found carefully organized documents telling a vastly different story. Video recordings of Victor admitting to forging Jessica's signature, bank statements showing suspicious transfers, and most damningly, a recorded conversation where Victor boasted about orchestrating the perfect con with Jessica's inheritance. "This is everything we need," James said, reviewing the evidence. "Victor was bluffing you last night. These recordings will send him to prison for a long time." But it wasn't just legal evidence Jessica had preserved. The box also held 4 sealed envelopes, one for each daughter, containing letters and mementos. And there, nestled among her children's legacy, was a 5th envelope simply marked for Sarah's father. Matthew's hands trembled as he opened it. "Mr. Porter," Jessica had written, "if you're reading this, I'm gone, and somehow my girls have found their way to you. Sarah made me promise to look after you, but it seems fate had other plans. I hope instead that you might look after my daughters. Sarah changed my life with her courage and kindness. She spoke of you often, worried you'd lose yourself after she was gone. Perhaps in finding my children, you found yourself again. Please tell my girls I love them beyond measure. And please know that Sarah is proud of you wherever she is. With gratitude, Jessica Miller." 3 months passed. Victor remained incarcerated, awaiting trial, the evidence against him irrefutable. The court had awarded Matthew temporary guardianship of the Miller sisters while the adoption process moved forward. Life had settled into a rhythm none of them could have previously imagined. Today was special, Lily's 11th birthday. The penthouse, once a shrine to minimalism, had transformed. Colorful streamers adorned ceilings, balloons clustered in corners, and a handmade "Happy Birthday Lily" banner, Sophie's artistic creation, dominated the living room wall. "Are you sure this isn't excessive?" Matthew asked Emma as they put final touches on decorations. His board meeting had been rescheduled to accommodate the party, something the old Matthew would have found unthinkable. Emma smiled, a genuine, unguarded expression that had become less infrequent. Lily deserves it. We haven't had a real birthday since Mom died. In the kitchen, Sophie and Abby supervised the caterers with comical gravity, inspecting the cake, chocolate with strawberry filling, Lily's favorite, and counting napkins. Lily was out with her new piano teacher, a strategic diversion before her surprise party. The guests will arrive in 30 minutes, Matthew's assistant reminded him, checking her tablet. The guest list included Lily's new classmates, teachers, and the therapist who had been helping all 4 girls process their trauma. "Thank you, Angela, and the gift arrived this morning. It's in your office." When Lily returned, the collective shout of surprise brought tears to her eyes. For hours, the penthouse, once silent and sterile, echoed with laughter, music, and the joyous chaos of children celebrating. After cake, Matthew led Lily to his office. "I have something special for you." In the corner stood a baby grand piano, its ebony surface gleaming. "It's for me," Lily whispered, approaching it reverently. "Your mother mentioned in her letter how much you loved music. Sarah played too." Matthew knelt beside her. "I thought you might like lessons, real ones." Lily's fingers ghosted over the keys. "It's beautiful." "There's one more thing." Matthew handed her a jewelry box. Inside was a delicate silver necklace with 2 charms, a musical note, and a small heart. "The heart has an inscription," he explained as she examined it. Lily squinted at the tiny words. "Family, found, not lost." She looked up at him, her eyes bright with an understanding beyond her years. "Because we found each other." "We did," Matthew agreed, his own vision blurring. "And I filed the adoption papers, if it's still what you all want." He didn't finish. Lily threw her arms around his neck, the necklace clutched tightly. "Thank you, Dad," she whispered against his shoulder, the first time any of the girls had called him that. Later, as the party wound down, Matthew found Emma on the balcony watching the sunset. "Lily called me Dad," he said, still absorbing the moment. Emma nodded, unsurprised. "That's what you are now, what you've become." Looking at this remarkable 12-year-old who had carried her family through impossible circumstances, Matthew felt a surge of pride and responsibility. They were healing each other, these 4 girls and himself, filling the empty spaces grief had carved within them all. 6 months passed like the turning of seasons, gradual yet transformative. The penthouse, once a monument to solitude, now overflowed with evidence of childhood. Homework spread across dining tables, instruments practiced in corners, artwork magnetized to refrigerator doors. Matthew's transformation was perhaps the most profound. The ruthless CEO, who once scheduled meetings in 15-minute increments, now left work promptly at 5, coaching Sophie's science fair project and attending Abby's dance recital. His assistant had adjusted to scheduling around 4 school calendars with remarkable efficiency. The Sarah Porter Foundation launched with a gala fundraiser supporting pediatric cancer research and assistance programs for families of patients. All 4 Miller sisters attended, dressed in coordinating blues, Sarah's favorite color. "You've changed," James observed, watching Matthew help Abby with her shoes before the event. "For the better, I hope," Matthew replied. "Unquestionably." Emma, now 13, had discovered photography, capturing their evolving family story through a camera lens Matthew had given her. Her pictures, displayed throughout the penthouse, chronicled their journey. Lily at her piano recital, Sophie winning the science competition, Abby's missing tooth smile, and Matthew looking younger somehow, the hardness in his face softened by joy. The adoption papers were finalized on a Tuesday morning. The girls chose to become Miller Porters, honoring both their past and future. "2 families that became one," the judge had commented, signing the final documents. Leaving the courthouse, Matthew felt Sarah's presence more strongly than he had in years, not as a painful absence, but as the guiding light that had led him to these 4 remarkable girls who had impossibly become his daughters. "Hold still," Emma laughed, adjusting her camera as Abby wiggled impatiently. The family stood by Sarah's and Jessica's graves, now connected by a garden of daisies the girls had planted between them. Spring sunshine warmed the polished stones and highlighted the fresh flowers arranged by small, careful hands. 6 months after the adoption, their Sunday ritual included this visit, no longer somber but peaceful, even joyful at times. The cemetery had transformed from a place of grief to one of connection. "Perfect," Emma said, capturing the moment. This photograph would join dozens of others in the leather-bound album they were creating together. The album itself was Emma's idea, a visual story of their unlikely family. The first section contained old photographs, Sarah as a child, Jessica with her daughters, Matthew in happier days. The middle chronicled their journey together, hospital visits, first days of school, holiday celebrations. The final pages remained empty, awaiting future memories. Later that evening, Matthew watched as the girls arranged the day's new photographs. "Do you think they'd be friends?" Sophie asked suddenly. "Sarah and Mom, if they were both here." "I think they already were," Matthew answered, showing her Jessica's final letter. "And they brought us together somehow." Lily's finger traced Sarah's smile in an old photograph. "They're still part of our family." "Always," Matthew agreed, watching these four remarkable children who had rewritten his definition of family, not just those connected by blood or birth, but by love and the invisible threads of fate that had drawn them together. Emma closed the album, but not before adding a caption beneath today's cemetery picture: "Two families becoming one." Exactly 1 year had passed since that fateful day in the cemetery when four little girls with wildflowers had changed Matthew Porter's life forever. Today, the Porter-Miller family gathered in the penthouse living room for a special ceremony of their own design. The space had been transformed. No longer the sterile showplace of a solitary billionaire, it was now unmistakably a home. Family photographs lined the walls. A piano occupied the corner where modernist sculptures once stood. Colorful throw pillows and handmade Afghans softened sleek furniture, and children's artwork was framed with the same care once reserved for expensive paintings. "Is everyone ready?" Matthew asked, looking at his daughters gathered in a semicircle. Emma, now 14 and growing into a thoughtful young woman, adjusted her camera on its tripod. Lily sat at the piano, fingers poised. Sophie held a journal filled with her careful handwriting, while Abby, nearly 7, bounced with barely contained excitement. "Today we celebrate Family Day," Matthew began, his voice steady, though his heart was full. 1 year since we found each other." On the coffee table between them sat two framed photographs, Sarah at 16 smiling despite her illness, and Jessica Miller with her 4 daughters taken during happier times. Beside them stood a third frame, currently empty. "In this family," Matthew continued, "we honor those we've lost by living fully in their memory." Lily began playing softly, a piece she had composed herself, hauntingly beautiful. Sophie opened her journal and read a poem about stars guiding travelers home. Abby placed homemade paper flowers before the photographs. Emma, always the protector and now the family historian, stepped forward last. From a folder, she withdrew a digitally created portrait she had worked on secretly for weeks. It showed all 6 of them together: Matthew, Emma, Lily, Sophie, Abby, Sarah, and Jessica, as if they had always been one family. "Because they're still with us," Emma explained, placing the portrait in the empty frame. "And always will be." Matthew felt tears prick his eyes as he looked at the impossible family portrait, the past and present merged into one beautiful whole. "The Sarah and Jessica Foundation has now helped 20 families affected by childhood cancer," he announced. "And today, I've finalized the educational trust for each of you." The practical details were important but secondary to the deeper meaning of this day. Each girl took turns speaking, sharing memories from the past year and hopes for the future. "I used to think family was just who you're born to," Emma said, her voice strong despite the emotion behind it. "But now I know it's who stays beside you, who fights for you, who chooses you every day." Matthew watched his oldest daughter with immense pride. The frightened girl who had carried her siblings through impossible circumstances had blossomed into a young woman of remarkable wisdom and compassion. "I have something for each of you," he said when they had finished. He handed each girl a small box. Inside were identical gold lockets, each containing 2 small photographs, Sarah on one side, Jessica on the other. "To remind us that love doesn't end," he explained. "It transforms and continues in new ways." As Matthew helped Abby fasten her necklace, she looked up at him with those innocent eyes that had once asked if he was Sarah's daddy in a cemetery. "You know what, Dad?" she said thoughtfully. "Sarah isn't just your angel anymore. She belongs to all of us now, and so does Mom." Matthew gathered his daughters close, these 4 remarkable children who had crashed through the walls of his grief and taught him to live again. Outside, spring sunshine bathed the city in golden light. Inside, a family bound not by blood, but by something stronger, celebrated their unlikely journey from strangers to loved ones. Sarah and Jessica had made a promise to each other years ago beside a hospital bed, one to watch over a grieving father, one to care for 4 vulnerable girls. Neither could have imagined how beautifully that promise would be fulfilled through loss and love, through pain and healing. As Emma's camera timer counted down and they posed for their official family day portrait, Matthew Porter, once defined solely by wealth and achievement, realized he had received the greatest gift possible. Not just a second chance at fatherhood, but a first chance at genuine happiness. The camera flashed, capturing the Porter-Miller family's smiling faces, a moment of perfect joy preserved for the future chapters of their shared story.